Hey, how's it going? My name is Eric McGrew, and I do some sculpting and some furniture building. And when I've been doing sculpting and things with wood now for about 20 years, I'm getting to where I finally feel confident enough that I'm getting into some art festivals and different things like that. I'm looking at going into my first art festival this season. I've already been talking to some decor and furniture stores and some galleries and stuff, and it's looking, it's looking promising. So I thought that as I go on this journey, I would talk a little bit about things that I've either learned in the past or I'm currently learning, because I'm doing both. I'm interviewing artists that are successful and figuring out what they've been doing and how they've done it to help them. So one of the things that I know was a challenge for me when I was starting out was I was always looking for that perfect piece of wood, and I would find artists that had stuff online and the grain was gorgeous and it just, I don't know, it was amazing. And I would reach out to them and be like, how did you know that piece of wood was going to be that beautiful? And I got varied answers, but a very common answer that I got, and I have found over the past 20 years to be very true, is, you just kind of start with a piece of wood and you never know exactly what you're going to get. And that's super key. Sorry guys, got some notices coming up. That's super key to some things that I think build character for you as an artist and whatnot. I don't know if you learn a little bit more just as you pick up pieces and you're like, okay, it's kind of what I think is going to happen or whatnot, or maybe you just kind of figure out subconsciously at times. I worked on a piece that was like this, and then I picked up another piece and it was like that, and so you kind of pick up stuff like that, which all could be parts of this. But I know that there are a few points here that have helped me, and the first and foremost is I just start. That's probably the biggest key. Sometimes I pick up a piece of wood and I just start with it, and it becomes something way better than I ever imagined. Like this piece right here, I mean, I know this isn't everybody's cup of tea, but look at the beautiful grain. Hey, Kevin, look at this grain. Isn't that just amazing? And the reality of it is that this did not start off looking that amazing. I didn't pick this piece of wood and say that's going to be an amazing piece of wood. It looked pretty bland. In fact, this is a much larger scale, but the piece that I made that sculpture out of looked very similar to this. And when you look at this, you can tell there's some figure in there, there's some color contrast, there's some interesting aspects to that wood. But the reality of it is that it's not that. Thank you. Appreciate that, Roblox. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. The reality of it is that when you start with a piece of wood, a lot of times you don't know what the grain is going to look like. So many factors contribute to this. One is the grain itself can be hidden by all these textures of like these, in these cases, they were chainsaw cuts. So the chainsaw, it leaves kerfing and swirling and it's fuzzy, it's hard to see. So it doesn't always show. And sorry, I have a highway behind my house. It gets kind of loud. But two, sometimes it's just diligence. You don't know exactly what you're going to. Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate that. You don't know what you're going to get into until you get into it. So, for instance, this piece that I'm working on right now, okay? This piece right here, now this is a multi-wood structure. It's got walnut, hickory, and this is silver poplar. It looked like this before I oiled it. That's what this looked like. It was just that like whitish kind of ashy looking wood. Didn't have much character to it. I had a little bit. You could tell there's some grain in there and whatever, but it wasn't that great. It was okay. And I just sanded it down to, I go to 220 on these because the oils actually recommend only 220. And so to be fair, I'm not sponsored by anybody, but I do use walrus oil on these currently. I really like that product. So just keep that in mind. But when I oiled it, I mean, this thing became, it's beautiful. Look at this. Look at that grain. And I mean, we as artists, right, we enhance the grain by our structure that we add to it through our design. And that's cool, but we can't change the grain of a piece of wood that frequently. So when people ask me like, how did you pick that piece of wood? The reality of it is most commonly I pick a piece of wood because it fits a size that I'm looking for. Maybe it gives me a hint of tonal contrast that I'm looking for. So those are like the chance options, right? I do think that, you know, with time you kind of learn that there's greater potential in certain pieces of wood than others just because you learn how wood grows and things. So I'm an arborist, and that is one thing. Like, I know where there is certain formations in the bark and trunk that's going to create like a lot of people call it iridescent, but it's really curly wood, or you know, if it's slightly dead and it's starting to decay, you're going to get like ambrosia kind of stuff. You're going to get spalting, right, which is what this has got going on. It was dying, so this is all spalting. It's where decay was setting in, right? So you do kind of learn. And the more you learn about a certain species, so as you start to work with certain kinds and species of wood, or the more you start to learn about and select large chunks of wood that you can cut pieces off of, then you start to understand the differences with all this stuff, right? It's definitely something that you can't perfect, but you can get better at, if that makes sense. And for a long time, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand that, but that's what artists were telling me. It's like, yeah, had an idea that wood might be good, but then it wasn't until I really started working it that it became what it is. And I was like, well, man, that seemed like a lot of work to put into something that you weren't sure about, right? That's like kind of, it's kind of hard to wrap your head at times around spending hours on something, or days maybe even, on a sculpture that possibly won't turn out. And as I've gotten a little older, I definitely have a different mindset on things. But that was a hard thing for me to overcome. I have ADHD, and it's really hard for me to not see results as quickly as I would like and to persist. But it's through that persistence that I found some of the coolest pieces of art that I've ever made. So don't give up real quickly. And then I had to change my mindset a little bit as well. So what I found is that what I did is, if a piece wasn't going the way I wanted, I kept going with it, tried to figure out what I could do to make it kind of what I wanted. And if the wood just seemed super bland, I looked for other methods to make the wood look better. So everything on this table right here is the same tree. It's actually out of the same section of tree, other than this big chunk I showed you. This is out of the main trunk, because this is the notch that we cut out for felling it. I felled this tree as a tree service company. The city called me and said they had a tree that was a hazard, and I responded, yeah. I had to go and take this down for what's it called, safety reasons. And that was awesome because I was able to see the tree as I was cutting it and things, and pick pieces and whatever. So looking at this table, I have 3 pieces that I'm super happy with, but then I've got this piece here that you can barely see, and I'm still working on this. This is mainly chainsaw roughed out. This was this is 14 inches in diameter and probably 20 inches tall, okay? I'm not super happy with this. It has potential. I haven't found the potential in it yet, but I'm not happy. I had some crazy, like, vague ideas that I started with, and I just don't like it. So my initial concept was to split it for firewood and throw it away. And a few years back, I talked to this artist who was a sculptor, and he's like, don't do that. Now, his reasoning that he said is a little bit different than my reasonings, and we're not going to get into the down and dirty of this, but his reasoning was, it could be the piece that you like the least that becomes iconic for you as an artist and sells for the most or gets your name in the world. And that's a valid point. That's happened more frequently than we might like to think. But my challenge to that thought is two things that we'll go into in another episode deeper. One, do I really want a piece that I can't stand being the iconic flagship of my brand and me? And two, if that was a fluke and you don't like it and you strive really hard not to make something like that, will you ever make something else like that, and will that make you a one-hit wonder? You're right. So I try not to hold on to things just because it might be the one that they love, and even though I can't stand it. But what I have learned is that if I'm patient and I wait, I can cut and nick and chunk at this until I come up with a different design. And yeah, it'll be smaller. It may look very different than what it looks like now, but I may not have seen the potential in each cut if I hadn't have started with something I didn't like. So it'll sit here for a while until one day I get the motivation and I have the right mindset and I have the patience, and I come out here and I start cutting at this until it becomes something that, who knows, could be a beautiful piece of pedestal art or a part of a totem that I'm going to build that will, not a totem as in ancient people or Native Americans or anything like that, but like modular pieces that are stacked, right? Until it becomes something that will be a beautiful piece of art. So it's wood, it's still got mass to it, it's not wasted. Don't throw it away just because you don't like the way it turned out for now. And you might find something absolutely beautiful in that, right? So that's another thing with wood. Being patient with it oftentimes results in the best result of wood. Now, one other thing that I would like to mention before we go is that if you're looking for wood and you want it to be absolutely beautiful, the closer you get to like unions of branches or the heartwood, the more you're going to start to see tonal contrast. You're going to see the heartwood mixed with the sapwoods and different things, and that's going to bring out a lot of color and contrast and tone that you may not have had, right, if you hadn't have cut into it. So that's a bit hard because sometimes there's a lot of waste. I mean, in art and in furniture both, there's a lot of waste in all this. I would probably say that a good, 30 to 60% of the wood that I start with is waste wood on the ground. And I say waste wood because I reuse it, but it's not something that stays as part of your sculpture. You have to block down to that. So when you get a really big chunk of wood, don't be intimidated to just start cutting into it. And as I do, mine's more organic evolution of art. So what I mean by that is I start with a couple of cuts here and a basic size I want it to be at the end approximately. And I start cutting, and then I react to each cut to make something new. So most of my stuff is not super pre-planned. The thing about that is that you want to make sure that when you do that, that you don't overcut to where it's less or smaller than what you want the end result to be, okay? So if you want to get into the heartwood of a tree and you want it to be 14 inches in diameter, you're gonna have to start with something that is, let's say, 28 inches in diameter or 20 inches in diameter, or, whatever it might be. So know that if you want something to be a certain size, you're going to have a lot of waste wood to get there. And that's the only way that you can get to seeing wood at that level. Okay? And getting that contrast and that tone and that grain and things like that. Other factors like water that was submerged for, wood that was submerged in water for a long time can have some beautiful effects. Wood that's starting to decay, which, like I said, all this is cause of that, can be beautiful. But do keep in mind that the more decayed a piece of wood is, the more brittle and fragile it is. And even as beautiful as it may be, you're going to lose a lot of its character just due to the fact that you're going to have to extract pieces from it that would not be sustainable for long term. I mean, think about it this way. If somebody pays a few $100s or a few $1,000s for your sculpture, and you sell them a piece that like falls apart because it was so rotten that in 2 years it literally falls off the stand and crumbles, then, you know, that, as beautiful as it was, it's not very significant or important. So keep that in mind when you're working with wood as well. Now, I did mention one last thing, but I'm going to mention one more thing before we go. This here, this is the same wood as everything on the table behind me. The difference is it's burnt, right? So when I started with this, it had beautiful contrast and it had beautiful tone, and but for some reason, so this is the end of the log, and you can see all the sun checking. So when I had this up, hey Allie, good to see you again. When I had this and I was sanding it, what I ran into was, for some reason, having the natural wood tone with all these checks in it made it feel just like it was decayed wood. Now, I'm not saying that I had the right perspective on it. Somebody else may have looked at it and said it was beautiful and that it should have stayed just like it was. And maybe it could have, and it would have been fine. The thing is that for me, I didn't feel like it gave the ambience that I wanted it to give. It didn't give the contrast that I was hoping for, and it didn't have the modern look that I wanted, right? So I burnt this. I charred it all with fire, and then I scraped off all the soot, and then I sanded it, and then I oiled it, and it became what it is now. And what you can see here with this piece is, as I was mentioning earlier, this was a beautiful knot that I had originally kept here that was punky and it was rotten, and I knew there was a chance that that knot would be something that was potentially not going to survive the firing process, the charring process. So I used the bandsaw and I cut out a notch there, and now I don't know why I keep putting it down, sorry. But now it has this beautiful contrast in tone and grain to the char. And I just absolutely love this piece. I really do. I don't know, I just, it's got all these holes in it. So, I think it turned out super awesome, and I'm super stoked with it. And I'm really happy with that. Now, for Allie, because she's a regular viewer of mine recently, which I'm super happy about. So thank you, Allie. Here's that piece, Allie, that we were making the other day. So here's that piece that I was doing the live sculpting with the other day, and unfortunately I wasn't able to make it into the glass holder for live plants like I wanted. It is a twig pot vase or a bud vase or whatever they call it, because I thought it would fall apart if I drilled out the hole for that big glass vase to go in there. But that's that piece that we were working on. So there's the finish view of it, and it turned out awesome. So in the end of this, I guess the point to keep, the few points to keep in mind that I'd like you to think about are, one, you don't really know what the grain of a wood or the contrast is going to look like until you get started. 2, persist at it, because even if the piece turns out to be a piece of junk and you throw it away, you've at least gained skill and honed your skills during the process that you can now take to your next piece. 3, when you start to work with certain species over and over again, you start to learn certain characteristic traits of them. So out here I work most of my wood, other than like that walnut and hickory on that one piece, which came from furniture offcuts, most of my wood is all sourced from urban forestry through my tree service company, and I'm recycling the wood that we have to remove. So I'm dealing with a lot of elm, Siberian elm, which is beautiful wood, cottonwood, willow, silver poplar, honey locust, ash, and from time to time I get other things like fruit trees, but not always. So you'll start to learn like different characteristics of wood and what to look for in those. And then with time you can start to read the grain a little bit more as you get more and more familiar with working with wood in general. And you can see the potential that's hidden below the surface, which doesn't come out until you've really started sanding and polishing, and then really doesn't come out until you've done the final oiling or urethaning or whatever you're going to do on it. So hope that helps you guys out. It can be frustrating. You can dedicate a lot of time to a piece that in the end you just don't like. But once again, try to have a different mindset on it. View it as, I've honed my skills for this amount of hours that now will make me more efficient, proficient, and better on a different piece that I'm working on. So thank you guys for stopping by and checking out this video. I'll be doing a lot more lives. I like the interaction. It's really good. I do have some videos that are not live videos that I've pre-recorded and put up. So check those out as well. And I hope that this was beneficial and helpful for you all. I'm also doing from time to time some live sculpting and carving videos. So if you want to join in on those, please subscribe, and then you can be advised or notified. Hold on, somebody's having a bad day. That makes me sad. Ambulances and fire trucks, so that's never a good thing. Probably an accident on the highway just by my house. But yeah, if you ever want to stop by and check out the live videos of me carving and sculpting, then I would really appreciate that. Please subscribe. Allie, positivity vibes. I like. See you next time. Thanks. Take care. Have a good evening. Bye.